Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar about lighting programming presented by Susan Rose. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. Just a few things before we get started. Everyone is muted, however you can answer questions in the chat box and we'll consolidate those and answer those at the end. This webinar will also be recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series on pro.harman.com, as well as visiting Harman Professional University to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you always for free. And now I'd like to introduce you to Susan Rose, the presenter for today's webinar. Susan Rose is a successful lighting designer, director, and programmer, having toured with major artists including Ringo, Starr and his all-star band, Louise Mandrell, John Barry, and more. Her self-penned Whole Hog Quick Reference Guide is an industry standard in console programming instruction. And now I'll pass the mic over to you, Susan.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to day 432 of House Arrest. Hope everybody's doing good out there. This is actually an honor for me to be on here with all you guys. That you guys took the time to join me today. It's nice having a conversation with people as opposed to just my cats and dogs. So I developed this. When they contacted me about doing a possible presentation, I'm such an unconventional teacher when it comes to teaching. Those of you that remember me or that are old enough to remember me from the early 2000s when I was teaching hog classes in the Hog Quick Reference Guide, I like to do things a little differently and just speaking English to people, like rather than a manual talk or tech talk that's taught in the textbook, teach things that are outside of the textbook. And about a couple months ago, I developed this lighting programming 101 workshop, not to teach how to program. It's not console specific. It's more just stuff that's not taught in textbooks, like just tips and tricks and shortcuts that I've learned myself over the years, whether it's from other programmers or from myself. It allowed me to do things more quickly and efficiently, because being a freelance programmer, I'm often put on rigs I don't know, that I didn't design. I'm thrown into a rig, whether it's on a ship or in a theater or a television show with 400 moving lights, that I've got to quickly have a system to get around quickly without having to look at a plot. Or I know you can do layout views now, but I just have a system of laying out every console so I can quickly get around. The first thing I usually do is, since I have a background in Hog, I started on the Hog one with Brad Stiller, who's on the call with me today. Believe it or not, no matter what console I'm on, I lay it out like a Hog. Like my views are always the same. So whether I'm on a Grand Anime or an M1 or a Geo or a Hog 4 or whatever, my views are always pretty consistent. So I can quickly, things are familiar to me. It's not about the console itself, it's about me being familiar with how to get around, where my groups are, where my colors are, where my palettes all are. Organization of groups is like one of the key things for me of getting around, as well as my user numbers. Now, with that being said, there's no right or wrong way to program. We all do things differently. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from other programmers on this call today of how you guys do things. But for me, user numbers are how I identify fixture types in a rig, not necessarily the manufacturer of the fixture, but fixture types. And it kind of stems back to the old days, and when we had the Mac 500s and Mac 600s and Mac 2Ks, my 500s always start at 501, my 600s start at 601, et cetera, et cetera. And now fast forward to today with all the different manufacturers and different fixtures, I still number my fixtures that way. So if I have a fixture that I think is similar to Mac 500, a medium spot fixture, I'll start at 501. Like a Mac 2K or a BL3000 or a bigger light is my 201s. My wash lights always start at 601, if that makes any sense to you guys. So I know that when I grab 601 through whatever, that's going to be my wash lights that are on stage to move around. So I number my user numbers like that by fixture. My LEDs, for me, always start at 801. So it's just a system that I have, once again, so I can quickly move around any rig no matter what fixtures I have in it. One of the first things that I do is it's all muscle memory for me. So for me, personally, when I do my pan and tilt, when I grab my pictures, I like to rotate the tilt clockwise for them all to come out to me. Then, of course, the pan going right and left. And I want my entire rig to do that. So one of the first things I do is once I get everything patched, I assign my user numbers to everything. Then I grab everything and tilt it out to see which ones are going in different directions. Because when things are going different directions, that does slow you down because it's once again, for me, it's muscle memory doing pan and tilt. So I'll go in there and start inverting all my pan and tilts. If a light is hung, as you can see on my little rig I designed for this presentation, which is pretty much the size of the rigs we'll probably be touring with for the next 5 years in nightclubs. I went in and I took my floor fixtures and inverted the tilt. So that way everything in this rig tilted out to me. If the lights hung backwards or set in the menu that the pan's offset, I want everything to come out to me, not have one straggler going the opposite direction. And even if a light's hung sideways, I'll go into the actual fixture editor and offset my pan so that it defaults to this as well. And that's just my personal preference. I just like everything coming out to me. So for this rig, I started my ORs at 301 because those are my smaller wash fixtures. My quantum profiles start at 501, the quantum washes at 601, and the Vipers at 212. So you can kind of see the system of the fixture types that I have with those numbers. So I know in my head what fixture I'm looking at on stage. I talked about panning and tilting inverts and the offsets. The offsets are kind of trial and error. Sometimes you just got to type in 90. Sometimes you just type in 50 or 4. I usually just type in numbers until it turns the direction I want to go. Laying out groups. I talked about group organization. The way people do things differently. I know theater does things opposite of in rock and roll. For me, as I'm looking at my rig, I like to number my rig from downstage to upstage, left to right as I'm looking at it. House left to house right or stage right to stage left, however you want to look at it. And I set my fixtures up by column, which you'll see in a minute. You look at this example here. This is a small rig. It's a stage basically on a theater with 4 electrics. And you'll see how I have things first electric, second electric, third electric, fourth electric, all my Max 500s, all my Vipers, all my ORs. And as you can see with the ORs, I also split them into the fixture layers. So that way I can grab each layer individually too without having to type in the numbers or continue to separate them when I'm selecting them. But one thing I also like to do too is put the number range in the group. So that way, if I'm doing a show and I look up, I'm having a problem with a light on the third electric, I'm not sitting there counting lights and trying to figure out which one it is. I can just go, oh, it's between 509 and 512. It's 511. And this works great too, like when I'm doing television and I got a gobo hitting somebody on the face, I can quickly identify which truss it's coming from or which electric it's coming from and just glance down and see what number range fixtures they are without having to really think about it. And that can quickly isolate the fixture that I need to grab and do that. So once again, as you see, I have an all button to select everything. That's where I'm blocking cues or just wanting to take everything to 0. But I have them separated by fixture type. All Mac 2Ks, then my first and second electric, my floor lights I put up here, all Mac 500s, first, second, third, fourth. The Vipers, I didn't have any on the third, so first, second, so they're all, if I want to grab just the first electric, I can still grab all my. So group organization, I can't stress enough of just laying out, scenic elements. If you have certain lights that are dedicated for scenic, I make a scenic group. I make, set of specials, I make a special group. So that way everything is isolated per electric or per truss and per type, so I can quickly grab them when I need to without having to, wonder what number it is or look at a plot and try to figure out where it's at. Here's another example of a TV show I did on an MA a while back. You can see I have things separated by towers. So we had a lot of towers on that. So I had all my lights from the different towers. These are just examples. I'm showing you guys of some different shows that I did. Building palettes. Most of you out there are probably already programmers and probably very advanced programmers on here as well. We all know what palettes are. And presets. I can't stress enough how important it is to put everything into these things. When I go into shows where people put hard values, especially if pen and tilt on things, it's just, I try to explain to them, you want to really go through every single cue to update a position. If a light's hung 2 feet off or a piano player moves, 5 feet over or whatever, I make a focus preset for everything. I don't care if it's just one light on a piano, it's a preset, because the cues all reference all these presets. It's the same with my color, it's the same with my beam. I always put not just gobo information in by gobo wheel, but I'll put rotation in there, rotating clockwise at fast, medium, slow, rotating counterclockwise at fast, medium, slow. That way, if I want to create some effect, I can select my lights and tell them, I want these lights in this gobo to go clockwise. I want them in this gobo to go counterclockwise. I'm going to take them out of focus and make some kind of cool, water effect. The palettes, automatically default to filtering out your parameters. However, you can override them and record color, beam, and intensity information or whatever into one palette if it's a particular effect or thing that you built that you want to reuse a lot. Even zoom size, focus size, focus rather on your gobos. There it goes. You guys have probably worked with embedded presets with your palettes. A lot of things I do to start a show too when I'm having to program something quickly is I make my generic positions that we all do, our center, our X1, our X2, our apron, several audience focuses. I usually have more than this, but just for this training purpose, I'm using these. Doesn't mean all the lights have to be in them. So I use embedded palettes a lot because it allows me, once again, to quickly access looks without having to recreate them all the time, because time is money and time is precious when we're programming fast. So a lot of times, perhaps I'll put my, my auras in across one, my MAC 2Ks in the cross two. I put different layers of lights in different positions, and I create what I call look 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually I'll do 6 or 7. So I'll record them as an embedded palette. So let's just say I create this cool look and I go, oh, I love that. I've got my first electrics in the cross one, my second electrics out in the audience, the third electrics in an apron focus. I really like this combination of looks. I'll record it as a look. So I'll use embedded presets with that, because that way if I adjust my X1 or I update positions because the light got moved or it's just off a little bit, it's automatically going to update all my look 1, 2, 3, and 4, because look 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all accessing these particular presets. Go back to the page. All right. I'm seeing where I'm going. Okay, I'm just seeing where I'm going with them. So that's how I set my look 1, 2, 3, 4. When cueing a show, every show is different. Whether I'm cueing music for a concert or for an artist or for a production show, I may have a song for cue list, or maybe one show is time coded and it's on one big giant cue list. I like to kind of separate things in case they change the order of things. Sometimes everything is on one list. But one thing I've noticed with a lot of the students that I work with is cue structure. And being a musician, I always like to, I program like I'm playing an instrument. I'm a musician, so it's structured where everything builds intro, verse, chorus, which, most of us do. But I've noticed with a lot of students that just aren't familiar with cue structure, it's just all about the effects engine, and let's run a valley, and let's run something circling and blinking around and flashing and strobe, and that's fine and dandy, you know how to do all that, but there's a purpose for running that valley, and a purpose for running that intensity chase, and a purpose for everything. And I always like to, when I'm going into a show, especially on punting a show or having to program quickly, I like to create me a cue list that basically has my top look, my intro, which we're going to talk about in a minute, intro, verse, chorus, et cetera, et cetera. So that way there's a purpose for the song building. You're building it like an instrument and you're playing it like an instrument. And I label it so people can run it. One thing that's a shortcut for me I want to share with you guys, really will make your life a lot easier, is what's called a talk cue. And basically people call it different. Sometimes it's transition cue, sometimes it's a start cue, but for me it's always called a talk cue. And I put it as my first cue and my last cue of my song. So if you look back on this page, you see I have those talk and talk at the top and the bottom. And what that is basically, for me, it's a blue wash. I select a group of fixtures, of wash fixtures that can, easily cross-fade into a blue without seeing movement. It allows me to go from song to song to song to song without seeing gobos flip around and stuff black out and things move around. In my particular talk cue, it gets, basic talk cue, it contains a blue wash. So every song in between, maybe not necessarily will have it, but for the most part, they always have that wash in between. This works great too when I'm doing like award shows and television shows, and we have our home-based look, our award look, whatever you want to call it. And typically, it's pretty consistent to what it is. Maybe the media server and the slide that they're using has, blue and gold in it. So I make a nice blue and gold talk look, award look. I put my intensity in it, I put my color in it, I put whatever I'm putting in it. But where this really helps out is I make a talk preset. I'll select my fixtures, and as you can see here, I made a group. Let's just say my particular talk look is going to contain the second electric auras and the second electric and fourth electric quantums, washes. I bring them up, I put them in their position, I put their color in, I adjust the intensity. If I have LEDs on my set pieces, I adjust all the intensity, and I actually record all that into a preset over here. I record all the information, the intensity information, the color information, the beam information. If there's something zoomed or gobos and they're out of focus, I'll record everything in that. That way, if, say, at the top of the show, the director comes on and says, hey, can you change that to amber and gold, or can you take that gobo a little bit out of focus, all I have to do is update that one preset, my talk preset, and all my songs, the rest of the show, will be updated without me having to frantically go, oh my God, I've got to go through every single talk look now and adjust that and change that. And it's an easy fix. That's a shortcut that I always use, especially for award shows. Because inevitably, once we go on camera, I'll be adjusting some levels sometimes, I'll be adjusting color, and then once we get it set, I update that preset, and we're happy for the rest of the show. So I always create me a talk look that has that information in it. So when I start creating a new cue list, I'll just say all my pictures at 0, and I'll say talk, boom, there's my talk list at the top of each cue list. Cue labeling. I cannot stress enough how important it is to label your cues, not that just so you can run it, but for someone else to run it as well. Even if it's time-coded, we all know time code goes down sometimes and the show must go on. I program a lot of shows for theaters and ships that someone else is running the shows, and I've got to make sure that they are able to follow my list. Anybody can step in and push that go button and get through the show. You don't know how many show files I've gotten onto where there was one recently, I was on a ship and it was beautiful programming, but the lists weren't labeled. They were labeled lights and audience, lights to stage, and I'm like, yeah, but where does that go? Where are the lights going to the audience? Where are the lights going to the stage? So I make it a point to always label it like I would label it musically, but in the notes column, if someone's running it that does things visually, or it's like dancer stage left, or this person says this word, or this part of the song, whatever my operator needs to know when that cue hits, I'll put in the notes column. And I just cannot stress enough, some of these shows that, like I said, I walked in have been beautifully programmed, amazing programming, but the labeling has been like, where does this cue supposed to go? I don't know where the lights go to the audience. So just keep that in mind when you're programming a show, especially that someone else will be running, to label it so that someone can just understand and walk into your show, or if time code goes down, the technician that's running it and get through it. And realistically, even for your own shows that you're running, if something happens to you, you get sick and your ME has to step in and run the show, they've got to know where the cues go. They just can't know what the light's doing in the cue. I want to know where the cue goes, not what it's doing necessarily in that cue. You can put in the notes column if it goes to the audience or a ballet start, that's great, but make sure you label it clearly so that people, other people can run it just in case. Another good example here is my MA file for Ringo. I learned, I want Brad to join me in this conversation. I learned the hard way, a whole new way of programming many years ago when I was doing the Walt Disney World Spectacle Dancing Lights at Disney. This was in 2006, and we were still on a Hog 2 back then. Don't judge, we're on Hog 2. It was a great console for its time. But anyway, I had thousands of Dutch channels. And, being as a tracking console, when you have values being applied in every single cue, hard values, intensities, effects applied over 1,000 channels, effects applied over a few hundred channels, it eats up memory very quickly. And Brad Schiller has been my saving grace so many times over the years. But this particular night, he got a call because I literally was not even halfway through a 3-minute song, and I maxed out the memory on the console. And I called Brad going, haven't seen this error before. What do I do now? Do you remember that, Brad?
Yeah, that was a great phone call. Tons of fun.
Yeah, so I had to, we moved it to I think we moved it to an IPC. And I really had to rethink how to program. And because there wasn't much memory on the Hog 2 at all, we had a little more memory on the IPC. So what I started doing was, and I still do this day, is when I write my effects, I don't record the effects anymore directly into the cue. I always trigger them with macros now, whether it's on an MA, on an executor button, or on a Hog as a virtual cue list, whatever console you're on, I always create my effects now and throw them on effects buttons or virtual cue list, and then I use macros now to turn them on and off. And that way, effects that I'm using over and over, I'm not wasting memory, eating up memory, rewriting them over and over and over, and I can still make them look different because I use Speedmasters. So I will put my hand on a Speedmaster, my tilt on a Speedmaster, my intensity chases on a Speedmaster, and even my zoom. I do a lot of zoom chases sometimes just for a morphing kind of look. And that way I can just set the Speedmasters for whatever song that the effect is running in to adjust the speed to the timing of the music, so at least it matches the music. So my Disney show, that show, the groups were crazy how I had them set up by each building and by the windows, the trim, the roof. I mean, I had things just so, the groups were crazy on that show, but organization, again, was what got me through that. But my macro lines were hilarious. I mean, sometimes I had to put 2 in there, a follow cue, because I had, trigger this list, release this list, trigger this list, but I moving forward to now, I still use that. So like even on a Ringo show, I have a lot of effects triggered on executor buttons. But what I also do is I also use macros for my Speedmasters as well. So I can, if I know that this is the speed I've set for this song, for this intensity chase, or for this ballet, or this can that I'm doing, I'll just have a macro automatically move that fader, because on the MA2 stuff, not many faders, to that level, so my speed's automatically adjusted. So I've gotten to where I use macros a lot to turn on and off things for me, and to automate things for me, and adjust my Speedmasters, and to turn off things and turn on things. And it just, it's another way of just, making it easier. So I have to remember to do it, or just not having to eat up memory and continue to reinvent the wheel every time I want to write a ballet, I also set up, I don't have a slide for this, but I wanted to talk about inhibitive faders. I use inhibitives, of course, when I'm doing television, but they're used for multiple purposes, not just for balancing out my levels for television, but I'll split my spot fixtures into like odd and even, or I'll stagger them, like a stagger 1, stagger 2. My wash fixture is odd and even, my Sharpie's odd and even, et cetera, because that way I can still, you know, if I want to make things look a little differently, I can pull things in and out, or I can, you know, use a negative inhibitive, where I can remove intensity, so I can bump and flash the music and still make things look different to punt on top of what I'm doing. And this helps too, like in the song, if I decide I don't want, you know, I want the ballet just to have one set of fixtures, I can just pull some out. I can pull out my Sharpie or pull out something and then bring them back in on a build when I want to bring them in. So just for punting, I use inhibitors for that as well, not just for setting levels. Another shortcut that I do, we also talked about the Speedmasters already, is some of the shows I get put in, when we all get put in when we're punting a show, we have a band coming on, they got 10 songs in their list. You're not really familiar with the songs, maybe you are, but you've got to get them in and you only have a couple hours to do this. Another little unconventional shortcut that I do is I make a generic cue list to get me started. So what I'll do is I'll start a cue list with my top cue, and I'll have a set start position for all my lights. That way they're all in a position to start out in, they're all right there, and they're across 1, they're across 2, they're stage wash, whatever I want these lights to start in. And then I'll go through and use my looks that I made in my pan and tilt, my embedded looks, my look 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll just slam a bunch of positions in there. And then I'll copy this cue list a few times. And that way I can go to the top of these lists and put my color in, my gobos in, my timing, whether it's a slow song or fast, and just on my times, at least I have a base to start with. I can push go, and I've got lights coming on and doing something. I've got my inhibitors, so I can remove stuff when I want to remove it. I've got my effects on buttons, so I can add stuff. But it's a quick way to at least be able to look like you have your entire show cued without having the luxury of having the several hours per song to program. The talk look also contains what I call a start cue. And my start cue, my start palette has got, say, my wash lights and the stage wash, and the zoom is at 60. I always want them to start there. I want my shutter to default to open, my strobe default to open. And there's a reason why for that in the next slide. All that information is in that first cue. So no matter what song I'm coming from, no matter where I'm going, if I'm creating a new song, I'm not having to waste the time saying, I want these lights in that preset, and these lights in that preset, and these lights to zoom to 60, and these lights. It all takes time. If I have everything in that embedded preset, once again, I select all lights, start. Top group, talk, boom, record my cue, it is done. There is my first cue. The reason I now also put shutter and strobe information, when we're cloning a show, I learned this during the last couple of years in Europe with Ringo when we were using rental gear every day, and I had different fixtures. Maybe someday I would have a quantum wash, maybe I'd have a MAC 2 case, sometimes I'd have a BL3000 wash, et cetera, et cetera. And when I replicate the fixtures to basically, you know, swap fixtures for my show, sometimes the DMX channels are different for the strobe, and I'd turn my lights on and no intensity was coming out. And I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand. My inhibitors are up. Nothing is, you know, wrong there. So I learned quickly to put my shutter information to open and my strobe information to open in that first cue as well, because that way, whatever day I went to, if the DMX value was different for the strobe or for the shutter, I would just update that preset, and all my songs were at intensity again. So, you know, when I'm cloning a show, you know, obviously I have all my positions that I have to update throughout the day. My gobos I have to update, but I put all my strobe and shutter information in a preset. And that's pretty much a lot of my tips and tricks and shortcuts for doing things, and I hope that that might have helped you guys. So I'm ready for some questions if you guys are ready.
I do have a question for you.
Okay.
The first question is, how do you ensure the time code is in time with the show?
Well, how do I ensure the time code is in time with the show?
Yep, that's the question.
When I'm time coding a show, I'm running, when I'm stamping this, I don't know if the question, I'm not sure I understand the question, but when you're stamping time code, I'm running the show live as if the time code is being stamped. So that way those cues hit. If people, I know most of you understand time code, but if not, it's hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So basically, as that clock is running, the minute I hit go, it takes a snapshot of that time that's rolling by. So if I have a certain hit I want the light to hit on, of course, I'm hitting go on that hit because I know the music, I program it, I'm hitting it, so that way it will always hit. Now, if I'm off a little bit, say I missed the hit, I can either restamp it or I'll just go shave. I've gotten to where I can just shave. I know how many frames to shave off, or I'll shave off a second, usually 4 or 6 frames I'm off. I'll just kind of shave off 4 frames and then it hits it right on time. But I'll just go through and, you know, when I'm stamping time code, I know where the cues go. Now, let's just say they cut, say I'm doing a time code show on a ship where it's one long time code thing. And after this song, they decided to make the applause gap 2 seconds instead of 3. Well, that's now affected all of my remaining times after that. So what you can do, I'm just going to use the hog for an example, is let's just say after song number 2, they cut 1 second out. I know that 1 second is now gone. So what I'll do is I'll select the range of all the cues after that. I'll select the entire range, and I will just minus 1 second. And what that will do, that'll recalculate all the times for me to readjust to the new time code with the 1 second being taken out. And now usually what I'll do too is when I'm having to cut and paste shows together where they've deleted a song or they've moved a song, and that's always fun, I'll find a cue in the song that I know that I hit on a certain beat, and I will play with that to see how many frames or seconds that need to be removed or added, and then I'll apply that to the entire list at that point. I'll find the one cue that I know hit right on the right beat, and then I'll select once again my entire range and say it was ahead by 1.1 frame, 1 second, 2 frames. I'll just select everything and add 1 second, 2 frames to everything, and it'll recalculate everything. That way it'll all line up again. So that it can get kind of tricky when you are doing everything on one big cue list, because inevitably you're going to cut a song or add a verse to a song or you know, add 3 seconds so they need more applause gap, and you're just going, oh, really? You're telling me this right before the show? That has happened to me before. So, you know, it's just knowing how, whatever console you're on, knowing what the protocol is to grab that whole, whether it's on a timeline or on a linear basis. I'm used to more of a linear basis because of the hog and the M1. But grabbing that range of cues and knowing, you know, maybe they're starting in a different hour, you know, so you just go in and adjust the hour on it. So that's what I do to make sure everything lines up. And it does take a little work sometimes if they do decide to cut some of your time off. You don't have to restamp your whole show. You just got to find what they cut out and either add those seconds or, you know, delete those or minus those seconds for everything to line back up again. So it's not that hard. It's actually a lot easier than having to restamp your whole show. So.
Hey, Susan, this is Brad. On that question, you might also talk about where the time code comes from at the other end of the connector to keep in time with the show. Who's in charge of the time code, and does it come from Pro Tools? Does it come from the sound desk? You know, how does that? I think that's part of the question too.
Oh, maybe you can help me answer that as well. For me, it usually comes from audio. Audio usually sends it to me. It can come from whatever, if they're using QLab or Watch Out or an audio track. It comes to me. It comes to me through an audio file, an audio cable rather. That's, you know, the time code is striped on a track. Even when I'm programming a show, like here at home, if I'm doing something in Previs, I'll have, you know, one channel is time code that goes to your desk, and the other channel is the audio that goes out to the speaker. You have something to add to that, Brad?
No, that was perfect. That's what I was getting at, is that how do you program timecode when you don't have the other part of the production there with you, and you covered that, so that was perfect.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, like for instance, I did the Dollywood show last year. I was on that project for a year. It was this tree that is basically the centerpiece of this new land that they just built. And prior to the tree even getting built, the client wanted to see it. They wanted to see the show of what we were doing. So they actually sent me a Hog 4 and a Previs, a Light Converse Previs computer to my house. And I spent 2 weeks, you know, just, intricately programming this. I mean, they wanted to see it pretty much perfect, which was a little crazy, but it helped me. But they also sent me the audio file. And the audio guys, I asked them to give me the audio file with timecode. So I had the timecode on one side. In stereo, they take one channel, they put the timecode on it, then the audio is on the other channel. So I had my speaker set up for the music, but the timecode was going directly into my console. So that way I was able to actually timecode it at home too, which actually that really helped for when we got on site. You know, I did this in February. We didn't start on site until June, but I already had all the shows pretty much dialed in or roughed in. I had to edit things, of course, but my time code was already stamped, and the colors and the gobos and everything we were doing was already at least roughed in and saved a lot of programming time on site. But the time code, to answer your question, yeah, it came to me on an audio file. And different consoles, this is another little thing just to know I learned the hard way. Different consoles like to see different levels. And I know the Hog in particular is very finicky on the levels it wants to hear. And I usually almost all the time have to have the audio guys adjust the levels that they send it to me. Usually sometimes make them louder for the most part, but if they're too loud, it can screw you up too. So what you want to do to make sure the level's right before you start programming is watch your time code go by. And if you see it, what I call hiccuping, where all of a sudden it stops, then it catches up again. So audio level, it's not something wrong with the console. It's most 99% of the time it's the audio level is either too loud or not loud enough. Like I said, different consoles have different levels it likes to see. Some don't really care, some do. With the Hog in particular, the experience I've had is there's a very fine level it likes to see for it to be consistent. So I did have to email back and forth a few times before we got the right audio file here at home for me that actually worked smoothly and it saw the time code. You can also, if you don't have a time code option, like say you haven't gotten the music yet with the time code, they just gave you the music, you can also use the internal time code on the desk. And I've done that as well. Most of these desks have an internal time code clock that you can turn that on, and when you start your music, hit that clock, and you can go ahead and stamp your time code. And then when you actually get the time code track from the audio person, then at that point, if everything's off by just, say everything's off by 15 frames because you started your clock, just the delay it took you to hit go on your internal time code and go on the thing, there might be a little lag. So you can just, at that point, if you notice that you're just a little frames off, you just select your entire time code list and say, oh, I was ahead 15 frames, so I'll just minus 15 frames, recalculate it, and now I've actually time coded my show without having time code signal. You know, at least I got it roughed in. And that way when I got the actual track, you know, I just had to adjust, you know, maybe play this a little bit to make it line up, but my cues all hit when they were supposed to. And if the audio guys changed the track and said, hey, we sped the tempo up, you know, then that's a different story. But if they just added, say, 3 seconds to it, once again, so they added a second chorus to it, they wanted the chorus to repeat itself twice, I would just go find, I'd add my new cues, and I'd find the rest of them and just roll them forward however many seconds, or 3 seconds, or 10 seconds, or however many more they roll forward. So there's different ways to approach time code. Sometimes it is quicker to restamp it if you're really trying to get a couple things right on. So it's just using your judgment. Is it quicker to restamp it, or can I just quickly add, you know, just select the whole range and add the 3 seconds?
Okay, I have another question for you. Do you pre-visualize your shows often, and if so, do you have any tips or tricks?
Yeah, I do, actually. Once again, going back to my Dollywood show, that was entirely previs. Once again, the tips and tricks for that is creating your presets for everything, because when you get on site, it is not going to be exactly like your previs. You know, previs is great. I love it. It saves a lot of time, but you're not going to have the perfect show, you know, because, you know, your focuses might look a little bit different. You know, taking things in and out of focus is different than it looks on your screen. Intensity levels are going to look different. Your gobos that you indexed to be up and down might be sideways. I even record those if it's a specific index that I need, like this Dollywood show. We had bears on a tree, and we had lightning, and we had, you know, frogs. I can't have an upside down frog on the tree. So every time I created my gobos, I would record the index of it as well. When I got on site, of course, I had to update my positions, because positions are always going to be off a little bit, and they're not going to be perfect on your, as they are on your screen. You know, the tree was a little bit different size than it was on my screen. So, I mean, I had to adjust my shutters. I recorded all my shuttering. So I had to shutter all these lights around this tree. So I would record my shuttering for certain looks that I had as well. That way, when I got on site, I had to adjust the shutters because some might have been angled differently than they were on my previs. So once again, putting everything into your presets, from your gobos to your indexing, to your focus, to your shutters, to your position, to your colors, so that way when you get on site and you've got to update something, you're not having to go through your entire show cue by cue by cue, fixing that one shutter that was like this instead of like this. That will drive you crazy. Or one light, you know, one of our poles that hung behind a building that wasn't on the original, you know, CAD plan. Yeah, surprise, surprise. So I had to change some things with that particular pole so that when I didn't previs, the building wasn't blocking the pole. When I got to real life, there's a building in front of the pole. So obviously I had to adjust shutters and focuses and purposes for those particular lights so I could clear that loop of that building. So I wasn't having to, you know, stress out and go through every single cue and fix that shutter or fix that gobo, because I just updated the preset. So when you're doing previs, just, you know, make sure you have your presets in, because that way when you get on site, all you got to do is update your focuses, update your positions, update this, and you've got at least a show to start with. Intensities, you know, or if there's certain scenic elements you're lighting, that's going to be a base intensity. Like, for instance, my tree, we had a base look on it, and it always referenced this particular intensity, this particular color, this particular focus, out of focus kind of thing. I put that in the palette too, because when I got on site, of course, the intensity looked way different than it did on my screen, you know, and plus I was dealing with architectural lighting, you know, vendors, you know, stores, hot dog carts, whatever ambient lighting was polluting what I saw on my screen. I had to adjust intensity. So I made an intensity palette for some things. That way I could just update that one particular palette, and it's updated it on my cues where I had that base look in. So it's just, once again, being organized, and just, you know, when you're doing previs, make sure you've got your presets all in a row. Previs is great to rub in your show. I mean, I've used it a million times for on my cruise ship shows. It's just being able to, you know, walk in and have a show to start with. But just realize that when you get there, there are going to be, you know, updates that are going to surprise you and go, oh, this looks a little different, because inevitably some scenic designers are going to put a set piece in front of one of your lights, or a curtain's going to be in that you didn't know about, or, you know, so yeah, just have all your presets in order. That way it makes programming a lot faster and easier for you to update those presets rather than having to go through every single one of your cues to update the one light.
Okay, great. The next question is asking if you have a preference on lighting fixture types, such as hybrid, wash, spots, or beams.
It depends on the show. I don't really have a preference, to be honest with you. I come from the old school. I'm older than probably most of the people on this call. I still like the warmth. You all know, I like the warmth of a car can. And one of my favorite shows that I do here in Vision Forge, we have no budget. I work a lot of no budget, low budget shows. And you make the best out of what you have to work with. And that literally is a car can rig with 8 Sharpie type pictures of the elation platinum beams. Has 8 lights and a bunch of mirrors glued around the stage. Literally the smoke and mirrors show. We had a bunch of cyber lights that didn't work. I took the mirror heads off and glued around the stage and focused them. It made it look really big. But I love, you know, it depends on the show itself. You know, a lot of our TV shows, I love the LED wash fixtures. I love the hybrid. I love the ones that have the multi-layers like the auras and the quantum washes where you can do the effects and the eye candy, especially for daylight shows and festivals. But I don't really have a favorite fixture type. Like I said, it depends on the application that I'm using. The Dollywood show was more of a theatrical and architectural combined approach. So it just depends on the show, to be honest with you. It's not about flash and trash all the time and bling bling, and sometimes it's just about art and just making something look pretty, and you're painting with light. So you're just, you know, selecting the proper tool for whatever application that you're using, whether it's theatrical or rock and roll or architectural. It's not about, oh, I have to have this particular light. It's about what kind of light do I need? What tool do I need to paint this scenic piece or paint this building or paint this stage or make people see the music? If I want people to see the music and rock and roll, yeah, I want a lot of the bling bling beamy lights with the powerful beams, because right now we're also competing with LED walls and, you know, with the media servers, and you have these great lighting looks and you turn the wall on, they all go away. So I like to see things, you know, with a crisp beam to them. And now the intensities are getting brighter with the development of all the LED fixtures that are out. It's amazing how far we've come just in the last 5 years as far as being able to have an LED fixture to compete with an LED wall. But the hybrid fixtures I like too, because you can use them as a wash or a spot, especially when you do have low budget applications. Sometimes you have to have a multi-use light because you can't afford to buy a lot of lights, so you can have one that can do two things. I think that I really like the hybrid lights a lot because you can use them for so many different purposes when you don't have, especially don't have a big budget.
Okay, great. The next question is asking, if using macros with massive amounts of data, how can you ensure with time coding that those can trigger on time as well? Is it better to stamp in a live performance or in a rehearsal if it's available?
I prefer to stamp in my rehearsals. I mean, get everything ready for the rehearsals. I mean, for the actual show. I stamp on my Timecode in rehearsals. As a matter of fact, I usually stamp it overnight. I like to program overnight without people a lot of times. I use a video to program to. And then once the performer, especially with my shows with dancers and singers, I don't want to make them wait for me for 5 hours to program their song. I have to stand on one spot. So I rub things in. But what's triggering with macros, my macros are all on the command line with that same cue. So say I have a ballet, I have a chorus where I want this ballet to start and this intensity chase to start. That macro is in that same command line, on that same cue line. So I have my cue, but in the command line from the macro, as soon as I hit that time code, it's going to trigger also that ballet or that, you know, intensity chase or whatever effect that I have going. And then the next cue, if I want the effect to stop, when I hit go again, that time code is going to, you know, trigger that cue, but that cue is triggering my effects. I don't have my effects in general time coded. I'm not that familiar with the time code on the Grand MA. I know on the MA it's timeline, and you actually record your pump and flash stuff, you know, live, and I think that's awesome. Honestly, I haven't worked with that a lot to have to be able to speak very much about that, but I'm not sure. I think I don't know how you slide the timeline on that. I know there's a way to do it, but yeah. But for me, the time code is the time code. If I get the chorus on this time, and that makes my lights change colors and triggers that effect, it's going to trigger that effect. And for some reason, I want the effect to turn off. I just reach over and just turn it off. Rather than go into the effects editor and tell everything to stop, I can just, you know, push my executor button on the MA, for instance, and just turn the effect off. But as far as time code triggering it, time code is actually triggering the cue, and the cue is triggering the cue itself is triggering the macros for the effect.
Okay, the next question is asking if you've ever been in a situation where you're hired to program and the console is a platform that you're unfamiliar with, or do you travel with your own console?
Yes, and yes. When I first started in this business with Louise Mandrell, before I was even an LD, I had no choice but to learn a different console every day because we did not travel with the console. Fast forwarding to now, yes, the majority of consoles that I program right now are the HOG and the M1 and the MA. However, one of my clients, one of my cruise ship clients, recently converted the entire fleet to the ETC Geo. So I took it upon myself to go to class to learn it, because I have to keep up with if I want to keep working. You know, we all have to continue learning. I'm still learning. I'm doing online classes now during our house arrest here. But as far as with the Geo, I actually went down to ETC and did a class right before I went on the ship, so it was still fresh in my head. And matter of fact, recently I hadn't touched the console in 2 years since the last time I programmed the ship. When I walked off the ship, I knew the console. Fast forward to now, I'm like, how do you turn it on? But I actually got a console and used my own time to sit there with the training videos and just to refresh my head on how to program. And if I've gotten to a venue where, for instance, maybe I'm touring and I have to do one show without my rig and I have to use the house rig and they want me to use their console, if it's a console I don't know that well, I have no problem asking for help. Whoever the house LD is, typically will hopefully know how to run their own console and help me set it up. But sometimes you have to learn quickly on the spot. Show me how to run this thing. Show me how to create some cues. And I have been in that situation many times where I've gotten there and went, oh, okay, give me a quick 101 of how to get around on this. But once again, the first thing I do, whether it's the Geo or whether it's whatever console, even the AVO console, it's a whole different platform for me. I still set my groups and my views up. So like I do on a HOG, I have my groups and I have my positions and my colors and my goes. Okay, I got a good template to start with. If I still number my fixtures the same, I still set my groups up the same, no matter what console I'm on. That way, if I am on a console I'm not that familiar with, I can still at least quickly get around because it's still familiar to me. So I'm setting it up in a familiar way from console to console. I'm not setting every console up differently. I set every console up the same, because for the most part, you got your views, you got your screens. So any console you can set up however you want, however you're used to seeing it. So that's just what I do. But yeah, I actually am in those positions a lot these days with all the new consoles coming out and having to keep up. I recently went to do a show on a Grandma 3, Grandma 3, and never touched one. And thank goodness they're still running it in 2 mode. So I'll admit I was nervous. I was intimidated because I thought, oh my God, this is for television, and the buttons are in different places, and wow, where did everything go? And but fortunately, there's the other audience, gave me a quick one-on-one how to get around on it. But once again, I set my custom views up just to how I'm used to seeing things. I'm stumbling around trying to learn somebody else's way of doing something when I have an hour to program.
Okay, perfect. We have a couple more questions if you're ready for more.
Yeah.
All right, this one is asking, what is your best practice for triggering a different cue list for a different song that is on a different executor or fader that is on a different page?
Can you repeat the question again?
Of course. What is your best practice for triggering a different cue list for a different song that is on a different executor or fader that is on a different page?
Oh, okay, I think I know how to answer that. So when I moved to the Reanimate, I have a macro basically for each song. And what I did was I created this macro and I copied it. Let's say I have 10 songs. I copied it 10 times. In my macro, basically, it is releasing the first line of the macro is turning off, let's just say, pages 1 through 50. Anything I don't want turned off, I don't put in that page number. Okay, but let's just say all my cue lists, all my sequences, whatever you want to call them, are in list 1 through 50. So I will have a line telling it to turn off everything, except turn off 1 through 50. Then I have another line saying execute list whatever Q1, then my next line will say, page whatever I'm going to. So I have like 4 different lines in it that basically turn off everything, load the page that I want, trigger that cue list, and trigger my first cue. And it also chooses my view, so my view goes up on my screen. So when I hit that second song, it automatically turns off everything else, basically releases everything else, and runs my talk cue. So I'm coming from a talk cue into a talk cue. So you see no transition. I have a 0 time. You have to have a 0 time on that talk cue and on your first cue, or else you will see it dip down and come back up. So that's the hard way too. But if I'm turning off this page and off this cue list, at the same time I'm turning on this page and this cue list and the talk cue, it's a seamless transition. On the hog, it's called, you can help me with this, Brad, it's page holdover and page activity. So when you change pages on a hog, it automatically releases the other cue list that you just came out of. But page activity, when you hit go, it's like its own kind of little macro that just triggers that first cue. But on the Grand May, I actually have a macro for each song. So once I create my first macro, I'll be glad to, if anybody wants to email me later, I can send you the actual commands in that macro. I'll open up Random APC and send it to you. But there's 4 lines in there that turn off and turn on things and load my view. And then once I copy that macro 10 times, I just go into each macro that time and just change the page number or change the sequence number. That way, I've got a good start, a good template to start with, but then I just run in there, put my new page number and my new sequence number in it. And that way I can move things around, whatever order, like the Ringo he wants to do. We cut a song one night, we're doing a 90-minute set. Instead of a 120-minute set, I can just pull those songs down the bottom and I can still hit, each of my macros to start my top cue for each song and still get from song to song with a seamless transition. So if you are using an MA, that's what I use as an actual macro in my macro window that says, Yellow Submarine or Help from My Friends, and I name them whatever the song is, but that triggers, turns on and off my pages and sequences and executes whatever cue list you want it to execute. You can have it execute however many things you want it to execute in that macro. If you want to turn on a fader or a fugger or whatever, you can put that in that macro.
All right, the next question is regarding SMPTE. Do we need the SMPTE generator from lighting to video console, or can we run directly through SMPTE to DMX input?
Can you answer that question, Brad?
Yeah, can you read it one more time? You could just say Sensi instead of reading out the
Okay, thanks. All right, regarding Sensi, do we need the Sensi generator from lighting to video console, or can we run directly the Sensi to DMX input?
Yeah, Sensi doesn't go into DMX. Sensi is a feed that comes in that's the timecode feed into your console. And typically timecode is either a Sensi format or a MIDI timecode format, and that'll depend on what actual device plugs into your console. So with Sensi, it's generally an XLR connector, and with MIDI timecode, it's a small MIDI connector, but it doesn't go into the DMX portion of it. And then that feed will come from whatever your source is, like we discussed earlier, from the audio or video department. Hopefully that answers the question.
Not just MIDI timecode, then it comes in as a MIDI pulse thing.
Okay.
Right, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The next question is asking, why does triggering effects with macros reduce the amount of memory size used?
Well, for instance, let's go back to my Disney show. There was no tracking going on in that show, because when you're on a tracking console, your first cue may contain, your intensity, your gobo, your color, and your position. You go to Q2 and you change the position, the only information in that cue that's recorded, hard value, is your new position. Your color is still staying in that first cue because you haven't told it to change. When I was doing the Disney show, that did not apply because that particular console didn't have much memory on it, but we didn't need it back then. I had thousands of desk channels that were literally on and off, so they were hard commands. So when I was applying an effect over, let's say, 500 channels, just calculating this precise timing and intensity up and down, up and down, up and down, it just sucked the memory out of the console. We don't have to worry about that as much nowadays because a lot of the consoles have way more memory in them than the Hog 2 days. But it does free up memory just because now you're just running that one effect over and over rather than recording those hard hundreds, if not thousands of values in each single cue. Like I said, for my Disney show, for instance, if I had a Christmas tree doing some kind of spinny effect on it, and I had these over here, this building flashing up and down, this building is doing some kind of wave effect, intensity effect, all those intensities were being applied over all those channels, you know, for each cue. So it was just eating up memory, eating up memory, eating up memory until I just ran out. So like I said, fast forward to now, obviously the consoles run, you know, a bajillion universes now, and you don't really have to worry as much about it. But I still just generally like to trigger my effects through macros because it just keeps me from having to rewrite them over and over and over. And then it's easier for me to control. So if I decide, you know, I have a valley in this cue and the director comes on our television and the director comes on, hey, quit the valley, I'm not having to sit there and go, oh, crap, I got to stop this. I can just hit my button and turn it off. So there's multiple reasons why I now trigger effects through macros. And then memory is more for the old 2 days, but it does still free up some memory. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but that's what happened, you know, years ago at Disney. So.
Okay, we have another question. What is the best and fastest way to program lighting when you're in a music festival and you are not the host LD of the festival?
Well, that would be going back to our punting. And when I'm punting a show, I kind of apply the same thing where sometimes I'll put positions on the fader, and I'll have, you know, colors and gobos up on buttons. But now I used to do it that way, but now I actually do the template that I showed you guys a few screens back where I'll create one cue list and then I'll copy it a few times and just put, like, I know my fast songs are going to be like ambers and reds and ambers and blues. My medium songs are going to be more magenta and labs and magentas and blues and more medium colors for me. Then my slow songs are going to be blues and congos and dark labs and different timings on them. And I'll create a bunch of cue lists that have this information in them. And I'll have my pump stuff on top where like I said, inhibitive faders. Patrick Dearson actually taught me this a long time ago with inhibitive faders. Even if I have these generic cue lists where I can at least push go and something's going to move and I got my color and I've got a gobo, I have my inhibitives so I can pull out different picture types or use the negative inhibit where I can remove intensity. So if I have odd and even wash lights, I can set my flash buttons up so I can bump and flash the music. It looks like I'm, you know, removing intensity by doing an intensity chase manually to the music. I'll have color overrides where on my executor buttons on the bottom, I'm obviously using a Grand Bay for this example. My executors on the bottom will have my odds and evens in yellows, odds and evens in whites, odds and evens in blues. So whatever color base I have in my cue list, I can bump and flash colors on top of that. I can bump and flash intensities. You know, I can play an instrument if I want. If it's a really rocking song, I'll have my effects on my executor buttons. So I want to run a valley. I can set my speed master. All of a sudden, I've got all this cool stuff going. I do write a macro to turn everything off. I do have what I call an off macro that just turns off all effects. So if I get lost and I get all excited and I'm playing and I'm bumping and flashing manually and I've got a valley running and a focus chase running and I got intensity on the lead lights running on my washes and I got, you know, this running on these lights, I got all this stuff running. You can't exactly at the end bump of a song but push every button to turn everything off. So I'll write a macro that just says off all effects. That way at the end of the song I want to do an end bump and have it go back to what they were in my last cue that I was running. At the end bump of the song that's coming, everything's going, I'll hit go to run my end bump cue, and I'll hit my macro effects, turn everything off, and boom, everything's turned off. So macros can really be used to help you trigger. Like if I know that I want to trigger multiple valleys at one time or multiple effects, I'll write a macro for that, rather than having to push, you know, go valley on the Sharpies, go valley on the barrel lights, go valley. If I use that a lot, I'll just write me a macro saying all valley. You know, once again, I can just do all valley. It runs all this for me. At the end of the song, my off macro turns everything off. But as far as punting, like I said, I'll just create some cue lists and copy them a million times and just change the color in the gobo. That way I've got a base to start with, and then I've got all my overrides, my color overrides, and my intensity overrides, and effects overrides that can now make everything look different. That's just a quick way from me. I know everybody punts differently, and I'd love to hear how other people do it as well. And I've seen some amazing punters out there that have it set up like a big, you know, it's awesome. But that's how I do it, just to quickly get something in a console for me if I have no time to program. I'll just use what the house LD has in there and build my cue list from that and just copy it a few times and then set up my page, and then I'm ready to go.
Okay, it looks like that was the end of the questions, and I think we're at time. Susan, I wanted to thank you so much for giving this presentation today. This was wonderful information. For everybody on the call, Susan's information is on the screen, so if you have additional questions, it sounds like she's open to having you reach out and ask them. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded, and we will be sending out the link to watch the video in several days. There are additional webinars coming up. You can find those on pro.harman.com, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Peace and love.